morning. Welcome to Hesketh Haven Homestead. It is a Friday morning in November, and I just wanted to share this. I'm kind of sweating. I just came into the barn. I just wanted to share this because I feel like it was such a success for me here on our farm. Many of you that know me know that I use Young Living essential oils for lots of different things, from purifying the air in my home to anxiety to plant food, getting rid of insects in my garden, and this time I used it with my goats. I had what they call hoof rot or foot scald something. I called the vet on it, and she really didn't want to come out to see it, to tell me exactly what it was. But in ruling out a lot of other things and going through their symptoms to what was happening with them, I figured it was foot rot or hoof rot, foot scald, one of those things. So, and I'll show you pictures of how I checked.
Okay, Gabby, let me see your foot. Okay, are you in? Okay, so the foot's rot and all of that would be, still, would be right in between her toes. Shine that light right in there, and if that was infected in there, it would be pink and it would be scaly and it would just be cracked and look very, very sore. And right now that looks really good. So she is doing good. And that was her worst foot right there. So
I won't actually be able to show you what it looked like because I didn't think about it fast enough, and I didn't take pictures of the actual what I was seeing. But I in between their toes. So their symptoms. Let me go back to that. Their symptoms. They were limping. They were not eating well. Their milk was going down a little bit. I wasn't getting as much milk. They were. They didn't want to jump up on the milk stand. They were losing weight because they weren't grazing like they should have or eating their hay like they should have been. They were just kind of laying around off their feet. And then when they did get up, a lot of times when it was real bad, I would have to go out and kind of like coax them to get up and come into the barn for their grain or whatever. And then they just didn't have the appetite that they should have had. They weren't ferociously going for their feed. So I did some checking of my own, and I trimmed their feet to make sure that their feet were trimmed properly and that was okay. But as I was trimming their feet, I noticed in between their toes looked like it was scaly and raw and sore, which are symptoms of the foot rot, hoof rot, foot scald, all of that. They didn't appear to have a fever, but that could be one of their symptoms too. But they didn't seem like they were. Their feet were not. They were hot, yeah, because it was summer. But we'd had a lot of rainy weather. Our pastures were wet. There were heavy dews some mornings where the grass was wet, and they were going out on pasture and the grass was wet, which was just feeding this bacteria in their feet, and not allowing it to dry out and heal up. So I'd done my research. I looked online. I looked up all of those. The symptoms were there. So I kept looking, for foot rot and foot scald and all of this stuff. I use Young Living essential oils, and I have two reference books that I use. One of them is the Animal Desk Reference book. It's written by Melissa Shelton. She's a veterinarian and holistic veterinarian. Um, that book has a lot of information in it. It's just hard to reference in there what I should be doing. It's hard to find things in that book. I also use the Essential Oils reference book for animals. That is the first edition. It's put out by Life Science, and it refers to a lot of the young living essential oils and their what they would recommend, their recommendations. So I was looking in those books and I was just not finding anything. Well, I happened to be reading an article on the internet about hoof rot in sheep and in goats, and it referred to thrush. Well, that was the trigger right there for me, because horses get thrush. And I'd seen in my desk reference books about horses and how to treat thrush in horses. So I thought, I've got nothing to lose. All the other recommendations, all the other cures for it or help for it was antibiotics. Well, I milk goats, and I prefer not to use antibiotics in an animal that I'm going to eat or use any of the products that I get from that animal, chickens or whatever. I just don't want to use the antibiotics in them. So, so I looked up the thrush for the horses, and it said to take the thieves spray. It's for surfaces and killing bacteria and things like that on surfaces. I also use it as a cough suppressant. If I get a tickle in my throat and I just can't kick it, I'll spray this in my throat, and I'm telling you, the cough goes away right now. But and it doesn't hurt you. Everything in here is all natural and all you can eat it. So so I used the Thieves spray, and based on what the Animal Desk Reference was telling me to do, it was telling me that I could use Thieves essential oil, lemongrass essential oil, oregano essential oil. Oregano is very, very antibiotic. So it's a very strong oil, and you got to be careful with it because it's a hot oil. So hot meaning it's gonna attack whatever it gets a hold of. It's going to kill bacteria. It's going to kill viruses. It's going to kill infections. So I knew oregano was going to be a good one that I used. Now I have also, so let me go back to the spray. Let me get ahead, back up a little bit here. So I took my Thieves spray and I opened up a brand new bottle. And in that brand new bottle, I added 30 drops of lemongrass, 30 drops of Thieves, and 30 drops of oregano, and I shook it up really well. So, the next thing that I knew that I could do was feed them herbs, because oregano is very antibacterial. or antibiotic, I should say, I knew that if I could give them oregano, the herb oregano, if they would eat it, that would also help. So I would be treating from the inside as well as the outside. So this thieves spray I was going to use as a topical. So I got my oregano that I had pulled from my garden, dehydrated, and I had it crushed up to use for my food, but I had two containers of it. So I just took one of the containers with me to the barn. And I would just pour some in my hand and let them eat it right out of my hand. And they thought they were getting a treat, let me tell you. Well, one of the goats. The other goat, she did one time, and she's like, nope, nah, I don't like that. I'm not going to do that. I tried sprinkling it on her food. I tried all kinds of ways to get her to eat it. She would not eat it. So I skipped that part on her. But the other one, she ate it. Now, what I've heard is that, and I use this to try this all the time, because if it works, great, and if it doesn't work, well, I tried it. They'll eat as much as they need to heal themselves. So I put some in my hand, and if they ate it all up, I put a little more in my hand, and I did that until they stopped eating it. Unless it was overboard. So the one goat that would eat it, I gave her like 2 or 3 little palmfuls. You know, I'd put it in the palm of my hand and let them eat it out. And she would eat 2 or 3 handfuls, and she did that until she was well. The other goat, she wouldn't touch it. So I didn't bother with her. I didn't try and force it. I tried different ways to get her to eat it. She didn't want it. So I just used this spray on her. Yeah, my phone's beeping at me. So I took the spray out to the barn with me, and twice a day, the goats that were infected, the goats that had any of that hoof rot, whatever you want to call it, any of them that had that, I sprayed that. I cleaned their hoof, and I sprayed that spray in between their toes, wherever it looked like it was affected. And so I sprayed that on there, and I sprayed it 3, 4, 5 sprays, depending on if I thought I got it good and covered. And I sprayed each foot that was affected. And I did that twice a day for the first 2 weeks. I did that regimentedly twice a day. And I gave them the oregano herb as well, if they would eat it. I offered it to both goats, every time. The one goat would eat it every time, and the other one would not. So I did that twice a day for the first 2 weeks, and then after the 2 weeks, then I dropped it back to 1 week, because I could see they were improving. They were no longer limping. They didn't, they were eating better. They were more active. They were doing better. So I dropped it back to 1 time a day until I could no longer see any of that infection in between their toes, or that's mostly where it was in between their toes. And so once I could see no more of it, they were showing no more signs or symptoms of it, as far as the limping and the lack of diet and eating and lack of moving around. I bet you I did that for a good month, and till they were showing no more signs of anything. And I checked them every day. I checked them to make sure that what I was seeing is still gone. So this was in, let's see, what day was that? It was in September when I did this. So the beginning part of September when I started that. So pretty much for the rest of September, I treated them every single day. After that, probably 4 weeks I stopped treating it. So now we've gone through October and we're into November now, and I'm still seeing no signs of that. So I moved them off their pasture that they'd been in all summer. And I moved them off of that, and while I was treating them, I had cleaned out the barn, so the barn was fresh, clean bedding, put them in there on fresh, clean bedding. The bedding started to look a little bit bad because I want to do this deep bedding for winter, so I was starting that actually. So once I started treating them, they went in on the clean bedding. I kept them in the barn for a month. I never let them outside. That gives their pasture 2 weeks to kill that bacteria off, let that bacteria die. And then, so when I let them out, I'd let them outside on sunny days only if the ground was dry. So if we'd gotten a rain, they didn't go back outside until it dried up. So, so far that is working fabulously. They've all been bred now. They did well during the breeding. They're all healthy. They're shiny. They're eating well. They've put weight back on. So I feel like they have recovered. However, this can be underlying and it can come back. So I'm going to keep a close, diligent eye on them, keep them on dry bedding, and we're just going to see how this plays out. Hopefully I got it. So the reason that, I'm going to step back a little bit and talk about the antibiotic thing. So I don't like to give antibiotics, but if I have to, I'm going to. However, since COVID, we haven't been able to get antibiotics. I didn't realize that we couldn't get antibiotics. So the one I had in the refrigerator was expired by about a year, so I threw it out, not realizing I could have still used it, even though it was expired. I threw it out, which, gosh, don't ever do that unless you know for a fact that it's not any good. It's just not as viable as it was during that fresh time, before the expiration date. But I could have still used it. Thankfully, the essential oils worked, thankfully, because I really don't want to cull my goats, which culling means to get rid of them. Send them to livestock is basically all you can do, because nobody's going to buy a goat that is ill. If they are buying goats that are ill, they're silly. You always, when you're buying an animal, you always want to make sure that it is healthy. So anyway, so I didn't have any antibiotics, and I couldn't find any antibiotics because everybody kept saying, oh, you got to give them antibiotics. You got to give them antibiotics for that. Thankfully, the essential oils worked. Thankfully, my herbs, I think, played a big part in it too. The one goat that was eating the oregano out of my hand, she may have been limping worse. She may have been infected worse. She may have known that she needed that also to help. I've heard that they do. Another example of using essential oils to help a goat that's suffering, or an animal that's suffering. I had a goat a few years back that she'd get out in the grass and she would eat and she would bloat up. By the end of the day, she would be so bloated she was miserable. So I have another essential oil. It's a Young Living essential oil that is called Digize, and it is for digestive health and digestive health. And so I took that out there and I put a few drops in my hand, and man, she licked it right out of there. So I did it again and she licked it right out of there. And I did it a third time. She licked a couple licks and she turned around and walked away. She had all she needed. As far as I was thinking, she knew what she needed and how much she needed. The next morning, I went out expecting to find her laid out, flat, bloated, gone, dead. She was fine. Her bloat had gone away. She was back up eating her hay. She ate her grass. Her grain. She was fine. So so that's another case where essential oils really did help. So I just felt like I needed to share this with you today. So I will keep you posted if it does not end up taking all of that away. If it comes back or whatever, I'll make another video on it. So, thank you for watching this. I hope you got something out of it, a little tidbit out of it. Enjoy the rest of your day, and give me a thumbs up, and hit the subscribe button to my channel. And we'll see you next time at Heskett Haven Homestead.